In a faraway galaxy full of light and peace, the stars were bright and quiet, and the alien worlds lived without fear or war for many long years. They had built tall cities with shining towers, and they had fast ships that moved like wind through space. They had laws they followed and councils they trusted, and their science had grown strong and powerful. The oldest among them sometimes spoke of old stories from before the peace, stories of a strange race called humans. Some laughed when they heard the word humans, because no one believed they were real anymore. Some said humans came from a place called Earth, a small blue planet that no one had seen in thousands of years. These stories said humans were fast and clever and full of fire. They were kind but also dangerous. They could build ships from nothing and make weapons no one had seen before. They were strong in war and wild in spirit, but one day they had vanished. No one knew how or why. Some believed humans had destroyed themselves. Others said they had gone far beyond the edge of space into the black, where no ship dared to go, and some said they never existed at all. To many young aliens, the name human was just part of old stories, a ghost, a tale told at night to make them behave. Elders would say, "Do not lie, or the humans will come for you," and children would laugh and hide under their blankets. But there were some who remembered the warnings not as stories, but as history. They kept old books with torn pages and old stars marked on faded maps. They watched the edge of the galaxy and waited for something they could not explain. On a lonely outpost near the edge of the known galaxy, there was a space station called Torvin. It floated in the quiet darkness like a silver coin spinning slowly across the stars. The crew on Torvin had been there for years. They had seen nothing strange, only silence, only space. The leader of the outpost was Commander Tvark, a tall being with gray skin and sharp eyes. He had read the old stories in secret. He did not believe all of them, but he remembered the warning in one line: "If the humans return, they will come without sound and without fear, and the stars will turn black." One night while the crew was resting, a strange signal came through the deep scanners. It was soft like a whisper, but strong like a storm. The technician called for Commander Tvark with shaking hands. He said, "We have something, sir." Tvark looked at the screen. It showed a small symbol, a mark not used in many ages. It was a circle with a line across it and 3 stars below. He knew this mark. He had seen it in an old book hidden in a locked box. It was the mark of Earth. He felt a cold wave run through him. The message repeated again and again in a broken language no one used anymore, a human language, and at the end of the message 3 words came up in the galactic code used by all species. "We are returning." The crew gathered around the screen, whispering to each other and pointing. Some laughed and said it was a trick or a mistake. Others stared in silence, their faces pale. The air on the station felt heavy, like it was watching and waiting. Tvark said nothing. He stared out the wide window into space, where only stars could be seen, and he wondered if this was the moment the old stories warned about. He ordered the crew to send the signal to the council and to stay ready for anything. Across the galaxy, the signal spread and reached many ears. Some laughed, some ignored it. But in hidden rooms, in dark corners of great cities, there were some who listened with fear in their hearts. They remembered the legend not as a tale, but as a truth, and they knew what came next. The stars were still shining, the galaxy was still calm, but somewhere far beyond the maps, far beyond the edge of all known worlds, something had moved, something old and strong, something that was not a myth. And soon the stars would begin to fade. The signal moved like a ghost through space, silent and steady, touching satellites that had not beeped in years, passing through dust clouds and asteroid belts and broken planets that had been forgotten by time. The message was the same every time it was received, a low hum like a heartbeat, a broken language mixed with static, and then those same 3 words in the galactic code: "We are returning." And though the message carried no threat, no demand, and no promise, it brought fear wherever it arrived. At first, most thought it was nothing, just noise from some dying star or a broken probe stuck in an orbit loop. Some scientists said it was a lost code from a ship that crashed thousands of years ago. Others believed it was an old broadcast bouncing back from the edge of the galaxy, a strange echo with no meaning. But a few knew better. In the great archive moon of Haveli's, a place where the oldest knowledge of the galaxy was stored deep underground, a quiet old alien named Archivist Ural watched the signal with shaking hands. He had spent all his life collecting myth stories and ancient warnings that others had thrown away or called nonsense, and when the signal reached the archive, his heart nearly stopped, not because he was afraid, but because he recognized the pattern in the code. It was human. Long before his time, maybe even before his kind existed, humans had used this pattern in their early space beacons. It was found in broken satellites floating around long-dead systems. The lines, the rhythm, the breaks, they were all the same. He had seen them only once before in a locked vault marked Danger 2 Memory, where old files were sealed under a warning that said, "Do not unlock unless the stars go dark." He unlocked them. Inside the vault were ancient images, grainy and cold, black ships shaped like spears long and quiet, moving through clouds of fire across ruined skies, voices recorded in fear calling out to Earth, but getting no answer. The last line in the file read, "They have fallen silent, and the sky is empty." Now the sky was not empty. Ural sent his report to the Galactic High Council with a special seal, a seal only used for events that could change the fate of all species across the stars, a seal used only once before when the machines of Zarnax broke free and burned half the quadrant before being shut down. The council received his message, but did not believe. They met in their great chamber with shining walls and golden floors. Leaders from 10 systems sat in their chairs, all dressed in cloaks and gems. Their voices proud and loud, they spoke of peace and power and how the galaxy was stable and safe. One of them said the humans were a joke, another called them dust from a lost time, and most agreed until the recording played. The lights dimmed and the room filled with the sound of the signal again, and again. "We are returning," in cold, hard code. No emotion, no request, just truth. When the video of the human warships played, some looked away, some leaned forward in silence. No one laughed. The head of the council, a tall creature with 4 eyes and skin like crystal named Vorakel, stood slowly and said, "If this is true, then we must act. We must send watchers to the outer rim. We must find where the signal began. We must know if the humans truly live." And so they did. 3 fast scout ships left from different corners of the galaxy, each with a mission to follow the trail to trace the signal back to its source. Each ship carried the best crew, the sharpest minds, the bravest hearts. They moved past border worlds into the black unknown, into the forgotten zones where no sun warmed the stars and no planet held life. Only one ship returned. It arrived at a central outpost near the Veil Nebula, covered in burns and scars, its engines shaking and sparks flying. The hangar doors opened, and from the smoke stumbled a single pilot. Her name was Sola. Then she was known for never losing her nerve and for flying into storms others avoided, but now her face was pale and her eyes wide with something that looked like fear. They brought her to the command deck and gave her water and warmth, but she could barely speak. When she finally did, her voice cracked, and she said, "They are real. We saw them. We tried to speak. We tried to run, but they let us go. They let me come back. I think they wanted me to come back." The officers stared and asked her what she saw, what she meant, and she said, "We found the source of the signal. It came from beyond the old Earth system, from behind Saturn. We thought nothing would be there, but then the stars vanished one by one. We saw shadows moving, and then they came." She said the ships were blacker than space itself, no lights, no symbols, but they moved like they were alive, not built like ours, but grown like something from deep inside the planet. They were big, so big they covered the stars when they passed above us, and they made no sound, not even when they passed right by our ship. We tried to send a message, but nothing worked, and then a voice came across all our systems. It was deep and old and cold, and it said, "Only one thing you left USTO, die now, you'll remember." Then everything went dark. The other ships were gone. She saw them torn apart in a blink like they were made of paper, and her own ship began to fail. Then just as fast, everything stopped. Her ship drifted powerless and alone, and one of the black ships passed by without touching her. Then the lights came back, and her engines returned, and the signal came again, "We are returning." She flew back as fast as she could, and when she finished her story, no one in the room said a word. They all looked to the stars now, wondering what would come next, and if the legend was now the truth. Somewhere beyond the stars, the message continued to echo, and the silence before the storm grew deeper. The galaxy was no longer calm and quiet. The stars that once blinked with peace now seemed to shiver with tension. The ancient tales once told as whispers were now spoken aloud in halls of power. The name of humanity, once buried in myth, now echoed across systems like a growing storm. Some called for answers, others for war, and many simply watched the skies with silent dread. On the central world of Veltrax, where the Galactic High Council had its seat, the news of the returning humans spread like fire through dry forest. Every screen, every broadcast, every corner of every street spoke only of one thing: the signal, and the girl who survived the Black Fleet. Her face now known across worlds, her voice repeated again and again in every tongue: "We saw them. They let me go. They want us to remember." The council sat again, this time with more eyes, more ears, and more fear. The head chair, where Vorakel usually sat, was empty, for he had vanished after hearing the message, and none knew where he went. Others believed he had gone to prepare for war or to find a way to stop what was coming. The seat remained cold and quiet as the new voices argued over what to do. Some said, "Send a fleet, show strength, do not wait for death, like the ancient species that once vanished." Others said, "Speak, send words of peace, perhaps the humans will listen and forgive." And still others believed the signal was a trick, a ghost in the machine, an old trap repeating itself again and again until someone believed it was real. But the truth arrived before any decision could be made. It began on the world of Lareth, 9, a quiet place known for trade and research, a world with no army, no weapons, only learning. The people there had built a tall tower that reached the clouds, where scholars watched the stars and tracked the movement of far-off objects. And one day something strange entered their charts, a shadow long and slow drifting through the edge of their system. At first they thought it was a comet or a dark asteroid, perhaps a lost colony ship that had burned out in deep space, but as it came closer they saw shape and direction and design, and then many shapes followed behind it, all black, all quiet, all moving as one. The tower sent messages, warnings, alerts, but nothing came back. The other worlds could not see the ships, yet the scholars watched in growing horror as more shadows appeared, filling the space between stars until it looked like night had fallen early. Then the first ship broke orbit. It did not fire, it did not speak, it did not land, it only hovered above the surface, long and sharp like a blade made of smoke, its skin reflecting nothing, its engines silent. It simply watched and waited. From every corner of Lareth, 9 people gathered to look at the sky. They pointed, they gasped, they fell to their knees. Some prayed, others ran and hid, and some simply stood still, unable to move or breathe. The black ship hung there like a silent god, and soon another joined it, then another, until 10 dark giants covered the sky like a curtain of metal and shadow. Then without sound the signal returned, louder than before. Inside every device, every speaker, every mind, "We are here." The words burned through walls and thoughts, through circuits and dreams, and the people understood this was no dream. This was the legend alive again. This was the myth walking into the light. Ships from the neighboring systems were sent in haste. They came armed, ready, unsure of what they would find. The human ships did not move, they did not fire, they did not react. The alien captains sent warnings and commands but received no answer. And then they made the worst decision. They opened fire. Blue flames lit the sky, beams of energy, missiles of fire, clouds of power, all thrown toward the silent ships, all aimed to break the legend and end the fear before it could grow. But the weapons vanished into the black, as if eaten by the dark itself. No explosion, no damage, only silence. And then the human ships moved. One by one they turned slowly toward the attackers, and in 1 second the sky split open, light filled the void, sound returned with a scream, and 10 alien ships ceased to exist, erased from space. Without any trace, the battle was over before it had truly begun. And still the humans did not speak. They stayed for 1 hour, hovering, watching, scanning, and then without a word they turned and left, drifting back into the stars like ghosts on wind, leaving behind silence, fear, and proof that the myth was real. The message spread faster than light. The council called for emergency talks. The people demanded answers, and across every world old books were opened, old symbols studied, old languages remembered, as all beings tried to understand what the humans wanted, what they would do, and how much time remained before they came again. In the shadows of power, in the deep rooms of science and war, new plans began. Old weapons were unearthed, alliances were made, enemies became friends, and ancient warnings were read again with new eyes. The humans had returned, not with noise, but with shadow, not with words, but with silence, not with demands, but with presence, and that was enough. Some believed the humans would now destroy all that had forgotten them. Others believed they would rebuild the old empire of Earth and take back what was once theirs, and still others believed they came only to be seen, to be remembered, to make the galaxy feel what they once felt, alone, betrayed, erased. But no one knew for sure. Only the stars watched as the black ships vanished beyond the edge again, leaving behind a wound that would not heal, a fear that would not fade, and a name that would not be forgotten. Humanity. The galaxy now knew they were not gone, not dead, not myth. They were real. And they had only just arrived. There was no warning this time, no signal, no whisper in the dark, no message carried on broken frequencies. The stars simply began to disappear one by one across different corners of the galaxy. Ships and stations looked up and saw nothing where stars should have been, and at first they thought it was a trick of the eye or a glitch in the system, but soon they realized the truth. The stars were not gone, they were blocked. Across every major system, reports came in shadows moving slowly across the sky, patterns of black shapes sliding between the planets and the light. Some said it was a natural event, some said it was a solar curtain, maybe a dust wave, or a rogue nebula. But those who had seen the ships before, those who remembered Lareth 9, those who heard the voice, knew this was not nature. This was the fleet. The humans had not come in small numbers, not with scouts or warnings or single ships testing the edge of space. They'd come with a force so wide, so silent, so unified that it covered the skies above entire planets. Ships shaped like blades and mountain, ships with hulls that drank the light and engines that made no sound, ships that moved with the grace of water, but the weight of a storm. On the world of Karos, a world known for its defense ring and advanced fleet, the people had trained for centuries for this moment. Their ships were fast armed with the best weapons in the quadrant, their captains brave, their soldiers proud. And yet when the human fleet appeared above them, they did not rise to meet it right away. They watched, they waited, because something deep inside told them this was not a normal enemy. This was something older, something stronger, something that did not come for war, but for something else, something harder to understand. The human ships made no move. They floated in formation like a wall of darkness wrapped around the planet, and then once again, without request or question, the message came not through channels, but through the air itself, through the bones, through the pulse of every living being. We have returned. The council met in panic again, their voices louder, their fear sharper. They no longer debated if the humans were real or if the signal was true. Now they asked only what to do and how to survive. Some screamed to send ambassadors, others shouted for full retreat, but a few in the corner said nothing because they knew that the time to speak had passed. On the 6th hour, the humans moved. One ship drifted forward slow and straight toward the Karos defense fleet. The alien commanders shouted for weapons to aim, for shields to rise, for fighters to launch, and they did everything they had trained for. Everything they had built was activated in a second. The sky filled with light and fire as missiles launched and lasers burned forward and ships rushed into formation. And then everything stopped. The human ship did not fire, did not move faster, did not blink. It simply absorbed the storm. Every blast, every beam vanished into its skin without ripple or sound, and when it was over, when the fleet of Karos had emptied its power, the human ship turned slightly, its hull glowing for the first time with a soft red, and then it released a single pulse of light. Not a weapon, not a beam, just a pulse, a wave of color and energy that spread across the Karos fleet in silence, and when it passed, every ship, every weapon, every engine shut down, not destroyed, not broken, just quiet, like someone had turned off the stars themselves. The human ship turned back, joined its fleet, and waited. Across the galaxy, other worlds saw the same black walls appear in their skies, and all of them reacted differently. Some tried to hide, others sent gifts, some called out for peace, some begged for help from allies who had no answers, but everywhere the result was the same. The human fleet did not land, did not conquer, did not speak, it only arrived, it only watched, and when attacked it responded not with rage, but with precision, with purpose, with power that made the strongest armies feel like dust in a storm. On one moon, a child looked up and asked her mother, "Who are they and why do they come?" And the mother had no answer, only tears, because the stories her grandmother had told her as jokes now stood above them in silence. The myth was no longer a myth, the shadow no longer a warning. It was now a wall of black ships stretching from one end of the sky to the other, blocking stars that had never known fear. And in that darkness, the galaxy saw itself small, fragile, full of noise, and now very, very quiet. The human fleet did not stay long on any world. It appeared above the capitals, the strongholds, the stations that once claimed to be the heart of power, and then it left without touching ground, without taking anything, without leaving anything behind but silence and the echo of the words, "We have returned." Some believed the humans were testing the galaxy, others believed they were sending a message, and some believed this was just the beginning, not of a war, but of a reckoning, the kind that comes not from hate, but from history, the kind that cannot be erased or ignored. And as the last of the black ships vanished beyond the moons of Karos, the stars slowly returned to the sky one by one, as if the universe had been holding its breath and now dared to breathe again. But the memory of the darkness would not fade, and the galaxy would not sleep easy again. The galaxy could not take it anymore. The fear had grown too large, the silence too heavy, and the shadows too long. The people no longer asked who the humans were, or why they had returned. They asked only what would happen next, and how long they had left before everything they knew turned into smoke and ash. The fleets that once protected systems now hovered in panic, unsure if their weapons even worked anymore, and the leaders who once ruled with pride now whispered behind closed doors, searching for answers they did not have. Then came the spark. In the system of Vorian, a powerful empire ruled by a warrior class with pride in their ships and history, the leaders could not accept silence. They had watched the skies grow dark, they had seen the black ships pass above their colonies, and they had stayed quiet too long. Now they believed it was time to strike, not out of courage, but out of desperation. The stories of the failed attacks on Karos had reached them, but they believed they were better, faster, stronger. They believed they could win where others had failed. They gathered their fleet over the moon called Erathia, a place with defense platforms and deep gravity wells. They positioned thousands of ships in formation, lined like teeth ready to bite into the darkness. The humans had not yet appeared in this system, but the Vorian commanders knew they would. The humans were moving across the stars in a pattern, slow and deliberate, and Erathia was next. When the black ships came, they came without sound. As always, they came like a slow tide that could not be stopped. They came without blinking lights, without radio signals, without emotion, just rows upon rows of darkness stretching across the edge of the sky like the end of all things. And this time the aliens did not wait. They opened fire before the human ships entered orbit. Missiles filled the air, beams of blue and gold light cracked through the silence like thunder. Every weapon, every tool, every defense activated in one voice that shouted not welcome but defiance. The first row of human ships vanished in light and fire. For a moment, the Vorian commanders thought they had succeeded. For a moment, they believed the myth could be broken. Then the light faded, and the black ships remained untouched. Not a single ship had fallen. Not a single mark had appeared on their hulls. Then the sky went red. It was not a color made by fire or flame. It was not heat or light. It was something deeper, something that filled the space between stars and pulled at the bones of every creature watching from below. The red light pulsed across the human ships, and then they moved, not fast, not wild, not angry, just direct, like arrows let loose with purpose and precision. The first strike was quiet, a thin beam of light that passed through the Vorian command ship and made it vanish, without sound, not an explosion, not a crash, just absence. The ship was there then, it was not then. The defense platforms followed one by one, each one struck by invisible lines that erased them from reality. Then the outer rings of the fleet began to fall, not from damage, but from failure, systems shutting down, pilots screaming into dead radios, engines cold, weapons locked. The ships became coffins in the sky. The Vorian tried to retreat, but space itself seemed to close around them. Gravity waves bent the paths of their ships. Navigation failed. Time twisted and slowed, and the black ships moved closer. The final scream from the Vorian High Commander was broadcast to a dozen systems before the signal cut off. He said, "We were wrong. We never understood. We are not fighting ships. We are fighting ghosts." Then the fleet was gone. The Battle of Erathia lasted 17 minutes, and by the end, not one Vorian ship remained. The human fleet drifted above the ruins for a short time, then left without a word. Across the galaxy, the message was clear. The humans were not bluffing. They were not confused or lost. They had not returned to talk or trade or ask for space. They had returned to show the galaxy what it had forgotten. In hidden rooms, the remaining council members argued louder than ever. Some wanted to surrender, even if no demands had been made. Some wanted to send every ship in one last attack, and some just sat in silence, staring at the stars. On the colony world of Drellis, a small child looked up at the night sky and said, "The stars are scared," and her grandfather nodded, not because he understood everything, but because he felt the same. No world was untouched by the battle. Every species watched the replay. Every news channel showed the erasure of the Vorian fleet in slow motion, with voices shaking as they tried to explain something they could not understand. Ancient texts were pulled from archives. Words written in human blood thousands of years ago were read aloud again and again. "We do not forget. We do not forgive. We do not fall." And now the galaxy knew these were not words of anger. They were truths, they were laws, they were the heart of what it meant to be human. Some believed more battles would follow. Others believed the humans had finished their task and would now leave as quickly as they had come. And some believed the war was only just beginning, that the humans had only opened the first chapter of a story written in silence. But none could deny the power they had seen. The council sent new scouts this time, unarmed this time with messages of peace, but the black ships did not answer. They simply drifted through space like shadows cast by stars that no longer existed. Their presence, heavier than gravity, their silence, louder than war. And still no one knew what the humans wanted. And still no one dared to ask. Because now they had seen what came when the humans were challenged. They had seen the storm behind the silence. And they were not ready for what might come next. Long ago, before the stars were mapped, and before the galaxy was stitched together with light and trade, there was Earth, a small blue planet that turned slowly around its yellow sun, a place filled with oceans, forests, storms, and fire, and above all with humans, beings who built their lives from dirt, and sky from metal, and fire from blood, and hope. They reached for the stars not because they were ready, but because they were never meant to stay still. Humans were not the first to leave their world, but they were the first to spread like a wave across the dark. They did not ask for permission, they did not wait for welcome. They saw the black sky, and said, "We belong there," and so they went, some in peace, some in war, some in silence, but always forward, never back. They built colonies on cold moons, they shaped life on burning rocks, they made machines that bent time, and tools that turned stone into cities, and for a while they grew strong, powerful, dangerous even, and the galaxy took notice. Not all species welcomed them, some feared their speed, some feared their numbers, and some feared something deeper, something older, something inside the humans that could not be copied or controlled. That something was their memory. Humans did not forget. When they lost, they remembered it. When they won, they carried it forward. When they were betrayed, they did not erase the pain, they turned it into purpose. And when the first war began, the war that was not written in most history books, the war the galaxy now tried to forget, the humans stood alone against a dozen united worlds who believed they could stop the rise of Earth before it became something they could no longer manage. It was a silent war, a secret one, fought not with announcements or banners, but with shadows, with broken treaties and cold invasions, with diseases launched in orbit, and stars turned into weapons, and Earth was burned not in one strike, but in 1,000 small cuts, until the blue turned black and the green turned gray, and the skies fell silent, and the humans disappeared, or so it was believed. But they were not gone. Some escaped into deep space, beyond the maps, beyond the scanners, beyond the charts used by every known species. They left not with screams, but with vows. They left with broken ships and broken hearts, and a promise that one day they would return, not to conquer, not to rule, not to destroy, but to remind the galaxy of what it had done. For 3,000 years they waited, hidden in gravity wells, buried in dead systems, cloaked in clouds of radiation. They rebuilt, they learned, they watched the galaxy celebrate its peace, its unity, its new history written without humans, as if they had never mattered, as if they had never existed. And through it all the children of Earth grew up in darkness, holding stories in their minds like fire. Stories of a home they had never seen. Stories of betrayal. Stories of silence. And when they were ready, they returned not as one voice, but as 1,000 shadows moving with one mind, not to take planets or steal resources, but to send a signal across the stars, not just in code, but in fear and memory and weight. On the station called Virelia 12, a place known for its old archives and quiet scholars, a strange ship arrived, smaller than the warships that had erased fleets, not a blade, not a fortress, just a long, silent vessel shaped like a spear with one glowing line across its center. It did not fire, it did not drift, it simply landed and opened its door. No one inside was armed, no one wore armor, only a single figure stepped out, covered in a dark suit with a symbol on the chest, a symbol older than the council, older than most living species, a circle split by a vertical line with 3 stars beneath it, the mark of Earth, the mark of memory. The figure said nothing for a long time, and the scholars stood frozen, unsure whether to run or bow or speak, and then the human began to talk. Her voice was quiet, even soft, but each word carried weight as if pulled from the core of a star. She said, "We came not to destroy, not yet. We came to show you that we remember the silence. We remember the fire. We remember how you turned your faces away while Earth burned. You called us wild, you called us dangerous, you called us gone. But we were only waiting. We watched you forget, we watched you build your peace on the bones of our world. We watched you teach your children that we were just a story. Now you will teach them the truth. We have not come to kill you unless you force our hand. We have not come to rule you unless you ask us to. But we will not be ignored. We will not be erased. We will not be silent. The galaxy will remember the name of Earth. The scholars recorded every word, sent it to the council and across the stars, and before the figure left, she placed a single object on the ground, a piece of black stone shaped like a tear with one word etched into its surface. Home. Then the ship left and the station remained quiet, and for the first time in many years the scholars of Aurelia 12 closed their books, not to rest but to listen. Across the galaxy more of these silent messengers appeared, not soldiers, not diplomats, not spies, just reminders placed in places of knowledge, in places of memory, in places where stories begin and end, and each one left behind a black stone marked with the same symbol and the same message. We are not myths. We are not gone. We are not finished. The war was not just about ships or weapons or fleets, it was about memory, about truth, about the right to be remembered, and now that right had been taken back not by force but by presence, by silence, by return. And though the humans said no more, and fired no more, and struck no more, the galaxy now felt more afraid than ever, not because the humans were angry, but because they were calm. Calm and watching. And waiting. The stars had changed, they still shone in the sky, they still moved in their old paths, but something in them felt different. The light seemed colder, the sky felt heavier, and across the galaxy the people looked up not with wonder, but with fear. The name of Earth no longer belonged to forgotten stories, it was now written in the present, carved into the surface of memory, like a scar that would never fade. The humans had returned, and they had not needed fire to take the galaxy by storm. They had used only silence, presence, and memory. The old powers were no longer sure of themselves. The Galactic High Council, that once ruled with pride, now sat in confusion, broken by fear and divided by blame. Some members had already left, fleeing to the edge of known space, hoping distance would save them. Others still clung to the hope of peace, offering messages of unity to the humans, who answered with nothing more than a single signal, repeating every cycle, like the toll of a bell. We are Earth, we remember. On the world of Calros, once known as the City of Voices, where politicians met to trade power and promises, the halls were empty, the towers dark, the debates silenced by the weight of the human return, and in their place a beacon now stood tall and silent, built by no hand that could be seen. It was made of black stone, cold and smooth, and wrapped in glowing lines that pulsed like veins in the night. It gave off no sound, no message, only presence, and yet everyone who stood before it knew what it meant. The age of forgetting was over. And so a new order began, not with war, not with laws, not with the raising of flags, but with a slow turning of minds, a quiet shift that moved across systems like wind through tall grass. The people who had once laughed at human legends now spoke their names with caution. The schools that once erased Earth from history now reopened old files. The libraries that once marked human documents as myths now placed them in the center of study, with lights above them, as if to say, look here, this is truth. Across the galaxy the changes began not by force, but by memory. Humans had not taken control, but they had made the galaxy remember what it had chosen to forget, and in doing so they had reshaped the thoughts of billions without firing a single shot. On the world of Sereth, known for its massive thought domes where minds connected across distance, a gathering was called. The brightest thinkers from across space were invited to discuss the human presence, to ask what it meant and what might happen next. They sat in silence for many hours, and when they spoke their words were not of fear, but of awe. One thinker said they did not come to conquer, they came to remind. Another said their silence is not weakness, it is strength wrapped in control. A third said they could have destroyed us all, and yet they chose not to. And a child who had wandered into the chamber by mistake said something no one forgot. She said maybe they came back to see if we were ready to be better. That thought stayed with many long after the thinkers had left the dome. The humans had not explained their plan, they had not given demands, they had not asked for surrender or tribute or rule, they had only returned and let the galaxy see them again, and that choice held more power than any fleet ever could. In the outer rim, a small ship drifted through the dark, carrying a message from a forgotten colony long thought lost. The ship held only one human, a girl born in silence, raised on memory, and trained not to fight but to carry truth. Her ship landed on the moon of Solon, a place sacred to the Sari people where no fire had ever been lit in war, and she stepped out with nothing but a small case in her hands. The leaders of the Sari met her with fear and wonder. They asked, "Why are you here? And what do you want?" And she opened the case. Without a word inside was a book bound in dark leather marked with the ancient symbol of Earth, and she handed it to them gently and then spoke the first words ever heard on Solon from a human voice. "This is our story. You may read it or not. You may learn from it or ignore it. But you will not forget it again." Then she left without waiting for a reply. Across the stars others like her appeared, not soldiers, not rulers, but carriers of memory. Some brought books, some brought songs, some brought only a name and a symbol, and each time they left behind a truth the humans were not here to destroy, but to remind, to awaken, to hold the galaxy accountable for what it had tried to bury. And as more people listened and read and remembered, something changed across the galaxy. Borders grew softer, alliances stronger, not out of fear, but out of reflection, because the people now saw the cost of forgetting, the price of erasing history, the danger of thinking silence is peace. The new order was not one of human rule, it was one of truth that had been hidden for too long, truth that had returned wrapped in black ships and red light and quiet voices, and the stars now held that truth in every flicker. In the final days of the old calendar, a new message came across every channel, every signal, every planet, a single phrase carried in the human voice that once echoed across battlefields but now spoke with calm. "We do not ask for power. We do not seek revenge. We only demand memory. Do not forget us again. For if you do, we will return once more. And this time we will not be so kind." The message ended and was not repeated, and yet its echo remained in every heart. And from that day forward the stars were never the same. Because now they were watched, not by gods, not by monsters, but by humans. The myth that returned, the silence that spoke louder than war, the shadow that brought light. Earth had risen again, not to rule, but to be remembered.